I'm just about ready to turn this post into an octagonal shape now. As before with the base, I've used a combination of finding the centre, drawing a circle and using that to define the 45-degree corners here. My next job will be to take this to the table saw and cut these corners off. Now the blade on my table saw tilts to the right hand side, so I set the fence up on the left hand side to prevent the off-cutting being trapped between the blade and the fence. Over on my mitre saw, I've been playing around with some ideas on how I can finish the top of this post. I didn't want to create a point that would be quite sharp. I didn't want to leave it flat either, so I come up with this this kind of bevel idea, or chamfer if you like, with the saw set at 22.5 degrees this way. Initially I tried one with, you can see, quite a narrow chamfer there around the edge and a large flat. But I'm now leaning towards this slightly smaller flat in the centre with larger chamfers around the edges. I think that's what I'll go for. But while I'm at the mitre saw, I can also cut the base to size. This is my benchtop router table I made a couple of years ago, and I've been experimenting with putting a V-groove near the top of this post. The idea is that I'll be able to grip the post, pick it up more easily if I want to move the stand. That's it really. Also it's a bit decorative. So I've tried a couple of ideas, different heights from the base, and I'm ready to go. I've got a V-groove and cutter set in the router table, and to guide it through at 90 degrees I use a simple push block. And there you go. Even though the saw blade currently fitted in my mitre saw leaves a good finish, I still like to finish end grain where possible with a hand plane. In this case it's an apron plane, low angle block plane, and taking very fine cuts with a very sharp blade, it's not too difficult to create full shavings along end grain. Now you could do this on the bench with a shooting board, cutting horizontally, but for something this small I find it easier to do it in the vise like this. Now you could sand these edges of course, but being end grain it will probably scratch, and it's very difficult to remove scratches. Now back over on my router table, there's one last step I'd like to take before I can start finishing this base, and it's to add a small chamfer around the upper edge. I'm going to create this using a bearing guided cutter, and I'll create it in several lighter passes to avoid any risk of breakout on this end grain. I'm also using a simple feather board as a temporary guard. Now I do have a larger guard for this sort of work, but because of its size and the small scale of this piece I'm working on, it's difficult for me to keep my hands on the timber without the guard interfering. Now before I can turn my attention to finishing this piece, I've still got these sawn edges to clean up on the octagonal post. So I'm using a block plane again to do this. I've got the piece clamped on my bench between a wonder dog and a bench dog. Now you could try and put this in the vise, but because of the shape, sometimes it can be difficult to hold and it can slip or twist as you try to push a plane across. That's why I'm doing it on the bench top, where it can't really move. It's quite secure there, so I like this. Ash is a timber that I find can be deceptively difficult to work. It's got a strong open grain character to it, but it still manages to tear out even when you're playing with the grain sometimes. It can be a real nightmare, so you've got to take it carefully. Look closely at which way the grain's running on the edges, and ideally have a low angle plane, I think. Either that or just reach for your belt sander.